When most people hear the word Sega Dreamcast, the first thing that comes to their mind is its 9/9/99 launch date in the US. But both the Japanese and the US launches are well documented, and are even iconic. But what happened to the Dreamcast in Australia? It was 1997, the Saturn had failed miserably and Sega wanted to make up for lost ground. To do this, they needed a new console. Development started when Sega Japan president Shoichiro Irimajiri recruited Tatsuya Yamamoto, a former engineer of IBM. Irimajiri believed having an external team free from the internal politics of Sega would help improve development. It wasn't long before the head of hardware development, Hideki Sato, the creator of the Mega Drive and Saturn, found out that the development had been outsourced. Feeling somewhat betrayed, he stubbornly started development of his own console. As a result, Sega ended up with two teams on opposite sides of the planet working in secret on the next Sega console, which feels reminiscent of how Sonic 2 was developed in the US and Sonic CD was developed in Japan at the same time. In order to save money, Sega decided that off-the-shelf components should be used to build the consoles rather than developing hardware from scratch. The US project was called Black Belt and was based on the Voodoo 2 graphics chipset by 3DFX Interactive, an up-and-coming 3D graphics chipset manufacturer. In a nod to the competitive nature of the development, the Japanese project was initially called White Belt, but was later renamed Dural after the metallic character in Virtua Fighter. Dural was based on the Videologic Power VR2 graphics processing unit, made by electronics giant NEC. In 1997, 3DFX Interactive decided to take their company public due to the success of their powerful graphics chips. They released an intent of public offering to allow the public to buy stocks in their company. As part of their legal obligations, they revealed their involvement in the then secret Black Belt project. This angered Sega of Japan so much that they dropped Black Belt almost immediately. On the 22nd of July 1997, Sega announced the Dural would be their next console. 3DFX sued Sega and NEC for unfair competition, breach of contract, and misappropriation of trade secrets. It was settled out of court for an undisclosed amount. Now that Dural was agreed to be the next console, it was renamed Katana in early 1998. Because many game developers struggled to develop for the Sega Saturn due to its complex infrastructure, Sega worked with Microsoft to create a special version of Windows CE, which would make it easier for developers more familiar with PC gaming to come on board for the Dreamcast. In an effort to guard against rampant video game piracy at the time, Sega developed their own disc format with Yamaha, the GD-ROM. GD-ROMs can hold a gigabyte of data compared to the CD-ROMs that can only hold about 650 megs. This initiative had the added bonus of getting around the requirement to pay royalties to the DVD forum. Unfortunately, due to an exploit from Mill CDs, a CD format that allowed multimedia to be stored on audio CDs, Dreamcast games became incredibly easy to pirate. If you would like to know how it was done, check out Modern Vintage Gamer's video in the description below. Every Dreamcast came with a built-in modular modem for out-of-the-box access to the internet and to allow for future upgrades. Initially, Sega chairman Isawa Akawa was opposed to the idea due to the $15 cost, but the investment ultimately became one of the biggest selling points of the console. Not happy to settle with the name Katana, Sega brought in the branding company Interbrand to come up with the final name for the console. They went through 5,000 names before settling on Dreamcast. The iconic orange swirl logo was chosen as it represented the origins of power. However, in PAL regions, the swirl was blue because of a German game developer Devolver having a similar logo at the time. On the 21st of May 1998, Sega held the Sega New Challenge Conference, which provided the public's first look at the Dreamcast and its capabilities. With the PlayStation 2 on the horizon, the pressure was on for Sega to get the Dreamcast out fast and strong. It was released on the 27th of November 1998 in Japan, but the US release was pushed back by 10 months to the 9th of September 1999 to allow more games to be available at launch, and with the added bonus of having a very sexy 9/9/99 release date to ramp up excitement. The US launch was a massive success, selling 500,000 units in 10 days. The Dreamcast was also released in Europe on the less iconic 14th of October 1999 and sold 185 units in a similar time period. The Australian launch didn't have as much fanfare as the Japanese and US launches. If anything, it was just a whimper instead of a bang. The ones responsible for the launch? When it comes to Sega in Australia in the 90s, there is only one name: Sega Aussiesoft. Aussiesoft was founded in 1982 by Kevin Burnmeister and Mark Dine. Their focus? To distribute video games for home consoles such as the Commodore 64 and Atari. Their relationship with Sega began in 1987 when the Sega Master System was launched in Australia, a market that served the system well in comparison to the US and Japan. Aussiesoft also oversaw the 1990 launch of the Mega Drive, which brought even more success for the company. In 1991, Aussiesoft was sold to First Pacific Hong Kong, but just a year later in 1992, Burmeister and Dine joined with Sega Japan to buy back the management of the company. Sega Japan contributed $14.5 million, or just over $28 million in today's money, on a 50% stake, and the company was renamed Sega Aussiesoft. Sega Aussiesoft had 49% market share in Australia at the time, with 70% of its revenue coming from Sega products. The rest came from selling software for other formats, such as the Nintendo Entertainment System and the Super Nintendo, which directly competed with Sega. However, the tight partnership wasn't to last. In March 1998, Sega relinquished its control of Aussiesoft, and in October, Infogrames bought a 62% controlling interest. Despite this breakup, Aussiesoft was still responsible for the launch of the Sega Dreamcast in Australia the following year. Aussiesoft was on the back foot from the beginning. The launch was originally going to happen on the 30th of September 1999, apparently not to clash with the AFL Grand Final, but was then pushed back to the 25th of October before being delayed again to the 30th of November. Aussiesoft blamed high demand in Europe, a shortage of chips thanks to an earthquake in Taiwan, and the added complexities of adapting the Dream Key, the software required for the Dreamcast to connect to the Australian internet, for the delay. But this was just the beginning of frustrations for Australian gamers. The first time the Dreamcast was shown to the Australian public was in late October 1999, when Aussiesoft brought 20 Dreamcasts to the Online Australia Internet Show in Sydney, an expo held by the Australian government to encourage the public to embrace the internet. Aussiesoft saw this as a key opportunity to hype up the Dreamcast's online capabilities, even promoting that internet access would be available on launch day. This would come back to bite them. In the lead up to the launch, there was little to no other promotions for the Dreamcast. This was mainly due to the lack of funding allocated to Aussiesoft from Sega Japan. Negotiations also fell through for an official Dreamcast magazine to be published in Australia. The day before launch, Aussiesoft signed a deal with Telstra to allow Dreamcast owners to surf the internet for 150 hours for free. However, the software that allowed access to the internet did not end up being available at launch. Owners had to wait until March the following year for the Dream Key to be ready. One of the first retailers to sell the Dreamcast in Australia was Electronic Boutique, now known as EB Games. Many of their stores held midnight launches, but when the clock struck 12 on the 30th of November 1999, not a single Dreamcast was to be seen. The stock didn't arrive until the following morning. IGN reported that another retailer also had to cancel their midnight launch due to the stock being stuck with Ansett, because Aussiesoft, wanting to save money, put the shipment on standby until space was available on another flight. And just to compound issues, due to the success of the Dreamcast in Europe, the first-party peripherals were also unavailable at launch. This meant people couldn't save their games or play multiplayer games without buying third-party peripherals. Thankfully, those who had pre-ordered visual memory units or controllers were able to get them a week later. Furthermore, of the 28 games announced to be available at launch, only 9 were on store shelves, some reporting to only have 4. None of those were first-party titles like Sonic Adventure or Sega Rally 2. Thanks to Sega of Europe not marking the country of origin, the games arrived on time, but were held in customs an extra day. When Aussiesoft finally got the shipment, all the games were disorganised, shrink-wrapped, and missing Australian classification stickers. The demo disc that was meant to be packed with the Dreamcast was also part of the shipment, which meant that customers were forced to return to the shop or purchase a week later to pick it up. Customers were not happy.
Not happy, Jan!
With many who bought the Dreamcast on launch taking to gaming news sites and forums across the world to air their frustrations. IGN dubbed the debacle the worst system launch in gaming history. But it wasn't all doom and gloom for Aussiesoft and the Dreamcast in 1999. Despite its rocky start, the Dreamcast won Product of the Year and Consumer Product of 1999 at the Australian Personal Computer Magazine's 1999 Annual Awards. Out of the initial 50,000 units, only 15,000 units had been sold by February 2000. This was minuscule when you think back to the 500,000 units sold in the US and the 185,000 units sold in Europe in the first 10 days. In a bid to increase market share before the launch of the PS2 in November 2000, Aussiesoft dropped the price of the Dreamcast from $499 to $299 in August 2000, but unfortunately this was not enough to save the console. Despite the large sales in Europe, the US and Japan, the Dreamcast just couldn't cope with the excessive piracy, the loss of goodwill from the Saturn and 32X, and the hype from the PlayStation 2. On the 31st of January 2001, Sega announced that it would be leaving the home console market and discontinuing production of the Dreamcast from the 31st of March. The Australian dream eluded Sega with its botched launch and a lack of real support from Aussiesoft, making collecting the console and game in Australia an expensive endeavour. No one knows how many Dreamcasts were ultimately sold in Australia, but it was likely less than the initial 50,000 units. As a lover of underdog stories, or underhog you might say, there is no way I couldn't love the Sega Dreamcast. I only have a single memory of the Dreamcast playing Sega Rally 2 with my brothers at a friend's house. This was the only time I'd ever played one before getting my own from the UK in 2014. I quickly fell in love with the quirkiness and originality of the games on the system, like Jet Set Radio, Space Channel 5 and Skies of Arcadia. Unfortunately, the Dreamcast was both too early and too late to save Sega, but one can appreciate the efforts they went to win back their fans. And that is the story of the Sega Dreamcast in Australia. Let me know if you want to hear any more stories of Australian gaming, or if you have any memories of the Sega Dreamcast. If you've enjoyed this video, feel free to like, comment and share, and if you want to see more, hit the subscribe button.